Thursday nights used to mean nothing to me. Just another weekday, another step closer to the weekend. Now Thursday nights mean everything. They're the nights that changed my life forever. The nights that turned me from Cole Merrick, trusting husband, into someone I barely recognize. My name is Cole Merrick, and I'm a construction supervisor in the suburbs outside Boston. I've been married to Lana for 6 years, and until 3 months ago, I thought we had something real. She's a high-powered insurance lawyer with one of those downtown firms that occupy entire floors of glass towers. Me? I build things with my hands, manage crews, and come home with dirt under my fingernails. We were different, but it worked, or so I believed. The first crack in my perfect little world came on a Thursday in September. Lana had been working late more often, every Thursday to be precise. "Big case," she'd say, pecking my cheek as she grabbed her briefcase. "Don't wait up, honey. These insurance fraud investigations are brutal." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was Lana Merrick, the woman who could argue a case until opposing counsel begged for mercy. If she said she was working late, she was working late. That particular Thursday, I decided to surprise her. I'd stopped at the florist on Maple Street and picked up a dozen white roses, her favorites. The plan was simple. Show up at her office around 8, take her to dinner somewhere nice, maybe salvage what was left of our evening together. The security guard at her building knew me by now. "Evening, Mr. Merrick," he said, tipping his cap. "Mrs. Merrick left about 2 hours ago." I stopped in the marble lobby, roses suddenly feeling heavy in my hands. "Left? Are you sure?" "Positive. Saw her walk out around 6. Said she had somewhere important to be." The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt like it took forever. Each floor that passed gave me time to think of reasonable explanations. Maybe she'd gone to meet a client. Maybe she was at the courthouse filing papers. Maybe the security guard was mistaken. But when I reached her office, the entire floor was dark. Not just her office, the whole floor. The cleaning crew hadn't even arrived yet. I stood there in the hallway, holding those roses, feeling like the biggest fool in Massachusetts. My wife had lied to me. The question was why. I took the elevator back down, my mind racing. The security guard looked up from his newspaper as I passed. "Everything all right, Mr. Merrick?" "Just fine," I said, though nothing felt fine anymore. Outside in the parking garage, I spotted something that made my stomach drop. Lana's silver BMW was gone from her usual spot. I pulled out my phone and opened the GPS tracking app we'd installed on each other's phones last year, a safety measure we'd called it. "Just in case something happens," Lana had said. The little blue dot that represented my wife's location wasn't at her office. It wasn't at home. It was across town at something called the Red Door Inn. I knew the Red Door. It was one of those riverside hotels that rented rooms by the hour as often as by the night. The kind of place where people went when they didn't want to be found. The drive across town took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she was meeting a client there. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe. But when I pulled into the Red Door's parking lot, I saw Lana's BMW parked next to a vintage red Mustang convertible that I recognized immediately. It belonged to Dane Foster, a real estate developer who'd been sniffing around Lana's law firm for months, supposedly looking for legal representation. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, staring at those two cars, feeling something inside me break and reshape itself into something harder, colder. The roses lay wilted on the passenger seat beside me. Finally, I got out and walked into the hotel lobby. The desk clerk was a thin man with tired eyes, who looked like he'd seen everything twice. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm looking for my wife. She might have checked in under the name Lana Merrick." The clerk checked his computer, then shook his head. "No Lana Merrick registered tonight." "What about Lila Foster?" I asked, the name popping into my head from nowhere. Sometimes the most obvious lies are the ones that work. The clerk's expression didn't change, but he nodded. Room 237. Checked in around 7. Lila Foster. My wife had created an entirely new identity just to cheat on me. I thanked the clerk and walked back outside, my hands shaking with something that wasn't quite anger yet. More like the moment before anger, when you're still hoping you're wrong about everything. I was pulling out my phone to call my sister Darla when I saw them. Lana and Dane Foster walked out of the hotel's side entrance, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. They were laughing about something, completely relaxed, completely comfortable. This wasn't their first time here. I ducked behind a parked car and watched them get into the Mustang. Dane held the door open for her like a gentleman. She kissed him on the cheek before sliding into the passenger seat. They drove off into the night, leaving me crouched behind a stranger's car in a hotel parking lot, clutching a phone and a dozen withered roses. I called Darla from the parking lot. "Cole, what's wrong? You sound weird." Darla owns a bar called Gray's Place downtown, and she knows everyone's business before they know it themselves. If anyone would have heard rumors about Lana, it would be her. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." "Always am. What's going on? Have you seen Lana around town, maybe on Thursday nights, maybe with someone who isn't me?" There was a long pause, too long. "Darla?" "Cole, honey, I didn't want to be the one to tell you this, but yeah, I've seen her at Gray's Place a few times. Always on Thursdays, always with that Foster guy. The one with the fancy car and the trust fund attitude. I figured you knew." "How long?" "Couple months, maybe more. They always sit in the back booth, always leave together. I'm sorry, Cole. I really thought you knew." I hung up and sat in my truck for another hour, watching the Red Door Inn's neon sign flicker against the night sky. The roses had started to smell sickly sweet in the confined space. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. I wasn't going to be the last to know. I was going to be the one who acted. I drove home and went straight to my workshop in the basement. I keep all my tools down there, along with some electronic equipment left over from my military days. I found what I was looking for in a box marked miscellaneous. 2 small GPS trackers, the kind you can hide under a car's bumper. The next morning, while Lana was in the shower, I slipped outside and attached one of the trackers to the underside of her BMW. It took 30 seconds and a magnet. Getting one onto Dane Foster's Mustang would be trickier, but I had a plan for that too. When Lana came down for breakfast, she was her usual composed self. Perfectly styled hair, perfectly pressed suit, perfectly practiced smile. "How was work last night?" I asked, pouring coffee into her travel mug. "Exhausting. These insurance fraud cases are getting more complex every year. I didn't get out of the office until almost 10. She lied to my face without blinking. 6 years of marriage, and she lied to me like I was a stranger. "That's rough," I said. "Maybe you should take a break from the Thursday night cases. Spend some time at home." Something flickered in her eyes, just for a second. "I wish I could, but you know how it is. Duty calls." "Right, duty." She kissed me goodbye, the same peck on the cheek she'd given me every morning for 6 years. But now it felt different. Now it felt like betrayal. After she left, I called in sick to work and spent the morning researching Dane Foster. Real estate developer, inherited money, never married, no kids. He lived in a converted warehouse downtown, drove expensive cars, and had a reputation for chasing married women. I also did some research on the Red Door Inn. It had been in business for 30 years, and its clientele consisted mainly of people who valued discretion over comfort. The kind of place where you could check in under any name you wanted as long as your credit card worked. By afternoon, I had a plan. I drove to Foster's building and waited in the parking garage until I saw the red Mustang. It took me less than a minute to attach the second GPS tracker. Now I could monitor both of them, see where they went, when they met, how often this had been happening. The data from the trackers painted a clear picture over the next week. Every Thursday, Lana's car would leave her office around 6 and drive straight to the Red Door Inn. Foster's car would arrive 15 minutes later. They'd stay for 2 to 3 hours, then leave separately. But Thursdays weren't their only meetings. The trackers showed lunches together, afternoon coffee dates, even a weekend trip to a bed and breakfast in Vermont that happened while I was visiting my mother in Florida. My wife wasn't just having an affair, she was living a double life. The GPS trackers were just the beginning. Once I knew for certain that Lana was cheating, I needed to understand the full scope of her deception. This wasn't just about catching her in the act anymore. This was about protecting myself from whatever else she might be hiding. I started with the obvious: finances. Lana handled most of our money, claiming she was better with numbers and legal details. I'd been happy to let her take care of it. Now I wondered what else I'd been happy to ignore. Our joint checking account looked normal enough, but when I dug deeper into her personal accounts, the ones I'd never bothered to examine, I found some interesting patterns. Regular cash withdrawals every Thursday, always from the ATM near the Red Door Inn. Charges at expensive restaurants I'd never been to. A credit card I didn't know existed. But the most disturbing discovery came when I accessed our insurance policies online. Lana had made some changes to our life insurance coverage 6 months ago, right around the time her Thursday night work sessions had started. She'd increased her policy and added some riders I didn't understand. I printed everything out and took it to my friend Jerry, who worked as an insurance investigator before he retired. "Cole, I hate to tell you this, but some of these changes are red flags," Jerry said, spreading the documents across his kitchen table. "This rider here, it pays out double if you die in an accident. And this beneficiary change, she's listed someone named D. Foster as a secondary beneficiary." D. Foster? Dane Foster, I'm guessing. If something happened to both you and her, he'd get a pretty significant payout. I stared at the papers, feeling that cold sensation in my chest again. "Jerry, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm not saying anything definitive, but I've seen patterns like this before, and they don't usually end well for the husband." I left Jerry's house with a new understanding of just how deep Lana's betrayal went. This wasn't just about romance or excitement or whatever she thought she was getting from Dane Foster. This was about money and possibly worse. That night, I confronted Lana directly. Not about the affair, I wasn't ready for that conversation yet, but about the insurance changes. "I was reviewing our policies today," I said over dinner. "I noticed you made some changes without discussing them with me." She didn't even look up from her salad. "Just updating beneficiaries and coverage amounts, standard stuff. I told you I was handling it." "You told me you were updating them. You didn't tell me you were adding Dane Foster as a beneficiary." Now she looked up. For just a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been panic. Then her lawyer training kicked in. "It's a business arrangement, Cole. Dane is helping finance one of my cases. If something happened to us, he needs to be able to recover his investment." "What kind of business arrangement requires him to be a beneficiary on our life insurance?" "It's complicated. You wouldn't understand the legal details." That was Lana's favorite phrase when she didn't want to explain something. You wouldn't understand. It had worked for 6 years, making me feel like the simple construction worker who couldn't grasp the complexities of her sophisticated world. But I understood more than she thought. "Try me," I said. She set down her fork and looked at me with the expression she usually reserved for difficult clients. "Cole, I handle the legal and financial aspects of our marriage because that's what I'm good at. You handle the practical stuff because that's what you're good at. It's worked fine so far." "Has it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been handling a lot more than just our legal affairs." Another flicker in her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I know about the Thursday nights, Lana. I know about the Red Door Inn. I know about Dane Foster." The silence that followed lasted about 10 seconds, but it felt like an hour. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm and controlled. I don't know what you think you know, but you're wrong. Am I? Then explain why your car was at the red door last Thursday when you said you were working late. Explain why you checked in under the name Lila Foster. She stood up slowly, her lawyer instincts taking over completely now. I think this conversation is over. No, Lana. This conversation is just getting started. But she was already walking away, heading upstairs to our bedroom. A few minutes later, I heard the shower running. I sat at the dining room table looking at the half-eaten dinner and realized that my marriage was over. The only question now was how it would end. The next morning, Lana was gone when I woke up. She'd left a note saying she was staying at her friend Mara's house for a few days. Until you come to your senses. Mara was Lana's college roommate and current enabler, a woman who believed that marriage was an outdated institution and that women should take whatever they wanted from life. I'd never liked her, and the feeling was mutual. With Lana out of the house, I had the freedom to dig deeper. I went through her home office looking for anything that might explain the full extent of her deception. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Hidden in a locked drawer, the key was taped under her desk, because Lana had never been as clever as she thought. I found documents related to a medical insurance scam. She'd been using multiple identities to file false claims, collecting payments for treatments and procedures that had never happened. The name Lila Foster appeared on dozens of forms, along with social security numbers and birth dates that didn't match Lana's real information. She'd created an entire fake person, complete with medical history and insurance coverage. But the most damaging evidence was a series of emails between Lana and Dane Foster, discussing their business partnership and their plans for the future. Plans that involved liquidating assets, moving money offshore, and starting fresh somewhere far from Massachusetts. Plans that didn't include me. I photographed everything with my phone, then put the documents back exactly where I'd found them. Lana couldn't know that I'd discovered this part of her scheme. Not yet. I needed to understand how deep this went, and I needed to protect myself legally before she realized how much I knew. The next step was talking to someone who could help me navigate the legal implications of what I'd found. I couldn't use Lana's law firm, obviously, and I couldn't afford the kind of high-powered attorney she'd hire if this turned into a divorce battle. But I knew someone who might be able to help. Detective Alton Pierce had worked fraud cases for the Boston Police Department for 20 years before retiring to run a small private investigation business. We'd met on a construction job a few years back. I'd been renovating his office building, and we'd stayed in touch. Pierce was the kind of cop who'd seen everything twice and been surprised by none of it. When I called him and explained what I'd found, he agreed to meet me that afternoon. Insurance fraud, identity theft, and adultery, Pierce said, reviewing the photos on my phone. Your wife doesn't do anything small, does she? What are my options here, Pierce? Legally, you could turn this over to the authorities and let them handle it. She'd probably go to prison, and you'd be in the clear. And unofficially? Pierce smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Unofficially, you could make her life very difficult before the authorities get involved. Level the playing field a little. What do you mean? I mean, your wife has been playing games with your life for months. Maybe it's time you returned the favor. He leaned back in his chair and studied me carefully. But before you decide anything, you should know that this might get worse. I've seen cases like this before, and they usually involve more than just insurance fraud. How much worse? Hard to say, but people who are willing to steal identities and commit fraud aren't usually worried about smaller crimes. You might want to watch your back until this gets resolved. I left Pierce's office with a lot to think about. Lana wasn't just cheating on me, she was a criminal. And according to Pierce, she might be a dangerous criminal. That night, I installed security cameras around the house and changed the locks. If Lana wanted back in, she'd have to ask permission. I also started making copies of everything: financial records, insurance documents, emails, photos from the GPS trackers. I stored copies in 3 different locations, including a safety deposit box that Lana didn't know about. By the end of the week, I had enough evidence to destroy her career and send her to prison. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. First, I wanted her to understand what it felt like to be betrayed. Lana came home the following Monday morning while I was having coffee in the kitchen. She looked tired, and her usual perfect composure was showing cracks around the edges. "We need to talk," she said, setting her purse down on the counter. "I'm listening." "I think we both said some things last week that we didn't mean. Maybe we should try to work this out." I almost laughed. She was trying to manipulate me again, using the same calm, reasonable tone she probably used with juries. But I wasn't a jury, and I wasn't buying her performance. "What exactly do you want to work out, Lana?" "Our marriage, our future. I know you've been suspicious about my work schedule, and maybe I haven't been as communicative as I should have been. But that doesn't mean we can't fix this." She sat down across from me at the kitchen table, reaching for my hands. I let her take them, curious to see how far she'd go with this act. "I love you, Cole. I know I haven't shown it lately, but I do. These insurance cases have been consuming my life, and I've been neglecting what's really important." "The insurance cases," I repeated. "Right. I know it's been hard on you all these Thursday nights, but this case is almost wrapped up. After that, things can go back to normal." "What case exactly?" She hesitated for just a moment. "I can't give you specifics, client confidentiality, but it's a major fraud investigation. Very complex, very time-sensitive. And it requires you to work at the Red Door Inn?" The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. Room 237, registered under the name Lila Foster. Ring any bells?" She pulled her hands away from mine and stood up. "I think you've been following me. I think you've been lying to me. Cole, listen to me very carefully. What you think you saw, what you think you know, you're wrong. And if you keep pushing this, you're going to ruin everything we've built together." "Everything we've built? Or everything you've stolen?" She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I actually knew. Finally, she shook her head. "I can't do this right now. I have to get to work." "Of course you do. Important case and all." After she left, I checked the GPS tracker. Her car went straight to her office building, where it stayed for the rest of the day. No detours, no mysterious meetings. She was being careful now, but it was too late for careful. That afternoon, I called Dane Foster's office and left a message saying I was interested in looking at some commercial properties. He called back within an hour, eager to set up a meeting. We met at a coffee shop downtown, and I got my first close look at the man who'd been sleeping with my wife. He was younger than me, maybe early 30s, with the kind of polished appearance that comes from never having worked with your hands. His handshake was firm but soft, and his smile was practiced. "So, Cole, what kind of commercial space are you looking for?" "Something for a construction business, maybe a warehouse with office space attached." For the next hour, I let him pitch me on various properties while I studied him, trying to understand what Lana saw in him. He was smooth, confident, and completely full of himself. The kind of man who'd never been punched in the face and probably needed to be. "I think I have the perfect place for you," he said finally. "It's a converted warehouse downtown, lots of character, great location. The owner is motivated to sell." "Sounds interesting. Is this the kind of property you usually handle?" "I specialize in unique properties, warehouses, lofts, anything with character. I also do some consulting work with law firms, helping them with real estate aspects of their cases." "Law firms?" "Yeah, insurance fraud cases mostly. When companies need to track down hidden assets, verify property claims, that kind of thing. It's lucrative work." I nodded like this was all new information. "That sounds complicated." "It can be, but I work with some very talented lawyers who know how to navigate the system." "Anyone I might know?" He smiled that practiced smile again. Probably not. These are specialized attorneys who handle very specific types of cases. After our meeting, I sat in my truck and thought about what he'd told me. Dane Foster wasn't just sleeping with my wife, he was her business partner in the insurance fraud scheme, which meant he knew exactly who I was when he agreed to meet with me, which meant this whole coffee meeting had been as much of a performance as Lana's kitchen table reconciliation attempt. They were both playing games with me, treating me like I was too stupid to see what was happening. That was their first mistake. Their second mistake was underestimating how much I'd learned about playing games myself. That evening, I called Pierce and told him about my meeting with Foster. He's in on it, Pierce confirmed. Probably helps her identify targets, maybe provides fake documentation. These insurance fraud rings usually involve multiple people with different specialties. How big do you think this operation is? Hard to say without more investigation. But if they're using multiple identities and filing claims across different states, it could be worth millions. And I'm married to the ringleader. Looks that way, which puts you in a very dangerous position, Cole. If they think you're getting too close to exposing them, they might decide to do something about it. Like what? Like make you disappear. Or make it look like you were involved all along. That night, I barely slept. Every sound in the house made me wonder if Lana had decided to come home, or if someone else had decided to pay me a visit. But morning came without incident, and I had a decision to make. I could turn everything over to the authorities and let them handle it. That was the safe, sensible option. Lana would go to prison, I'd be free to rebuild my life, and justice would be served. Or I could make them pay for what they'd done to me first. I chose the second option. The plan I came up with was simple in concept, but complex in execution. I was going to destroy their operation piece by piece, making sure they knew I was doing it, making sure they understood exactly how it felt to be betrayed and manipulated. But I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. My sister Darla had been running Gray's place for 10 years, and in that time, she'd built a network of contacts that included everyone from city councilmen to small-time criminals. If you needed something done quietly in this city, Darla knew someone who could do it. "You want to ruin your wife's life?" she asked when I explained what I'd discovered. "I want to give her a taste of her own medicine." "Cole, honey, I love you, but this sounds like a good way to get yourself in trouble." "I'm already in trouble, Darla. The question is whether I'm going to fight back or just lie down and take it." She studied me across the bar, and I could see her making a decision. Finally, she nodded. "What do you need?" "Information, contacts, and maybe some help making sure certain people know certain things at certain times." "I can do that, but promise me you're not going to do anything stupid." "I promise I'm not going to do anything illegal." "That's not the same thing." "No, it's not." She poured me another beer and leaned against the bar. "All right, let's ruin some lives." The first phase of my plan was simple. Make Lana and Dane paranoid. I wanted them looking over their shoulders, wondering what I knew and what I might do with that knowledge. I started small. Anonymous tips to the IRS about unreported income. Anonymous tips to the State Insurance Commission about suspicious claims patterns. Anonymous tips to Dane's business partners about his extracurricular activities. None of these tips included enough detail to trigger immediate investigations, but they were enough to get both of them visits from various officials asking uncomfortable questions. The GPS trackers showed me the results within a week. Lana's Thursday night hotel visits stopped completely. Dane's car made several trips to a storage facility outside town, probably to hide evidence. They were running scared, but they were also getting desperate, which made them dangerous. The first sign of escalation came when I arrived home from work one evening to find my front door standing open. Nothing was stolen, but someone had gone through the house systematically, searching for something specific. I checked my hidden cameras and saw Dane Foster letting himself in with a key, probably a copy Lana had made. He'd spent 2 hours going through my office, my workshop, even my bedroom closet. He hadn't found the evidence I'd collected because I wasn't stupid enough to keep it in the house. But now I knew they were willing to commit burglary to protect themselves. Time to escalate. The next morning, I called Lana's office and spoke to her secretary. "This is Cole Merrick, Lana's husband. I need to speak with her about a family emergency." "Oh my goodness, is everything all right?" "It's my mother. She's been in an accident. Lana needs to come home right away." Within 20 minutes, Lana was calling my cell phone, panic in her voice. "Cole, what happened? Is your mother okay?" "My mother's fine, Lana, but we need to talk." Silence. Then, in a much colder voice, "You lied to my secretary about a family emergency?" "You've been lying to me about a lot more than that. I'm not coming home to play games with you." "Then I'll come to your office. I think your colleagues would be very interested in some documents I've found." "What documents?" "Insurance claims filed under the name Lila Foster, medical records that don't match your actual medical history, email correspondence with Dane Foster about moving money offshore." Another long silence. "I'll be home in an hour." She arrived in 45 minutes, and she wasn't alone. Dane Foster followed her into the house like he owned the place. "Cole," she said, her lawyer voice in full effect, "we need to discuss this situation rationally." "Rationally? You've been committing fraud, stealing identities, and planning to disappear with my money, and you want to discuss it rationally?" Dane stepped forward, trying to look intimidating. "Maybe you should be careful about making accusations you can't prove." I looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "Dane, right? We met for coffee last week. You told me all about your consulting work with law firms. Very informative." His face went pale. He hadn't realized I knew who he was during our meeting. "You recorded our conversation," Lana said. It wasn't a question. "I documented everything. Every meeting, every lie, every fraudulent claim. I have enough evidence to put both of you in prison for the next 10 years. They exchanged glances, and I could see them calculating their options. "What do you want?" Lana asked finally. "I want you to understand what it feels like to have your life destroyed by someone you trusted. Cole, we can work this out. We can make this right." "No, Lana, we can't, but you can make it less wrong." "How?" "By confessing. By returning the money you've stolen. By accepting responsibility for what you've done." Dane laughed, but it sounded forced. "You think we're just going to turn ourselves in because you ask nicely? I think you're going to turn yourselves in because the alternative is worse." "What alternative?" Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and showed them a video. It was security footage from the Red Door Inn, showing them entering and leaving room 237 together. The timestamp clearly showed it was during hours when Lana had claimed to be working. "This goes to your law firm's partners tomorrow morning," I said, "along with copies of the fraudulent insurance claims, the fake medical records, and the emails about your offshore accounts." Lana's composure finally cracked. "You can't do this. You'll ruin everything." "Everything was already ruined, Lana. I'm just making sure everyone knows it." "We'll deny everything," Dane said. "It's your word against ours." "Actually, it's your own words against you. Amazing what people will admit when they think they're not being recorded." I played another audio clip, this one from my coffee meeting with Dane, where he described his consulting work with law firms in detail. "You son of a—" "Careful, Dane. Everything you say right now is also being recorded." He started toward me, but Lana grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said quietly. "He's got us." For the first time in months, my wife was telling the truth. They left an hour later after I'd explained exactly what evidence I had and exactly what I planned to do with it. They had 24 hours to decide how they wanted to handle the situation. They could confess voluntarily and hope for leniency, or they could wait for the authorities to come looking for them. Either way, their criminal enterprise was finished. That night, I called Pierce and told him what had happened. "You realize they might try to run," he said. The GPS trackers are still active. If they try to leave town, I'll know about it. And if they try something more direct? Like what? Like making you disappear before you can turn over that evidence. I'd been thinking about that possibility all evening. I've got insurance. What kind of insurance? The kind where if something happens to me, copies of everything get delivered to the FBI, the State Attorney General, and the Boston Globe simultaneously. Smart, but be careful anyway. Desperate people do stupid things. He was right to worry. The next morning, I woke up to find all 4 tires on my truck slashed and a note tucked under the windshield wiper. Back off, or this gets worse. Instead of backing off, I called the police and filed a report. Then I called the local newspaper and told them I had evidence of a major insurance fraud ring operating in the city. The story ran that afternoon without naming specific suspects, but with enough detail to make it clear that arrests were coming soon. By evening, the GPS trackers showed both Lana's and Dane's cars heading toward the airport. I called Pierce, who called his contacts at the FBI. They were both arrested at the departure gate, boarding a flight to the Cayman Islands with fake passports and a suitcase full of cash. The arrest made the front page of the next day's paper, along with photos of both of them in handcuffs. I kept that newspaper. It was the first day in months that I'd felt like myself again. The trial took 8 months to get to court, and by then, the full scope of Lana and Dane's operation had become clear. They'd been running insurance fraud schemes in 6 different states, using dozens of fake identities, stealing more than $2 million over 3 years. Lana's law firm fired her immediately and cooperated fully with the investigation. Several of her colleagues testified that they'd suspected something was wrong, but hadn't known how to prove it. Dane's real estate business collapsed when his other clients learned about his criminal activities. His trust fund was frozen to pay restitution to the insurance companies he'd helped defraud. I testified against both of them, describing how I'd discovered their scheme and what they'd put me through. The prosecutor called me a model citizen who'd been victimized by people he should have been able to trust. Lana's defense attorney tried to paint me as a vindictive husband who'd fabricated evidence to get revenge on his cheating wife. But the evidence spoke for itself. Documents, recordings, financial records, testimony from dozens of witnesses. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Lana got 12 years in federal prison. Dane got 10 years. Both were ordered to pay full restitution, plus penalties and interest. I got my life back. The divorce was finalized while Lana was awaiting sentencing. She tried to claim half of our assets, but her criminal conviction voided her rights to any marital property. I kept the house, the savings, and my self-respect. 6 months after the trial ended, I was having dinner at Gray's place when Detective Pierce walked in and joined me at the bar. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Better. It's been an adjustment being single again, but I'm getting used to it. Any regrets about how you handled things?" I thought about that for a moment. I could have just turned them in immediately and avoided all the drama. But I'm not sure that would have been as satisfying. Satisfaction isn't always worth the risk. Maybe not, but sometimes it's worth it anyway. Darla brought Pierce a beer and refilled my glass. "You hear from either of them?" she asked. "Lana writes me letters sometimes, apologizing, asking for forgiveness, claiming she never meant for things to go as far as they did." "You write back?" "No, there's nothing left to say." Pierce nodded. "What about Foster?" "Haven't heard from him at all. I think he's smarter than Lana about accepting when something's over." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the evening crowd filter into the bar. Gray's place had become my regular hangout since the divorce. Familiar faces, no surprises, no hidden agendas. "You ever think about dating again?" Pierce asked eventually. "Not yet. I figure I should probably learn to trust people again before I try to build another relationship." "That's probably wise. Besides, I'm enjoying the peace and quiet. No more lies, no more games, no more wondering what someone's really thinking when they smile at me. Sounds lonely." "Sometimes, but lonely is better than betrayed. Darla leaned across the bar. Cole, honey, you can't let what Lana did poison you against everyone. There are good people out there. I know that. I'm just not ready to go looking for them yet. When will you be ready? When I stop checking my rearview mirror every time I drive somewhere. When I stop wondering if people are lying to me when they tell me simple things like what they had for lunch. When I can trust my own judgment again. Pierce finished his beer and stood up. That might take a while. Probably. But I've got time. After he left, I stayed at the bar for another hour, thinking about the past year and what I'd learned from it. I'd learned that people you love can betray you in ways you never imagined. I'd learned that sometimes the only way to get justice is to take it yourself. I'd learned that revenge, while satisfying, comes with its own costs. But most importantly, I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd thought. When everything I'd believed about my life turned out to be a lie, I didn't fall apart. I fought back, and I won. The house felt different when I got home that night. Bigger, quieter, but also cleaner somehow. Like a weight had been lifted from the air itself. I went down to my workshop and looked at the wall where I'd posted copies of all the evidence I'd gathered against Lana and Dane. Photos, documents, transcripts, financial records, the complete story of their betrayal and my response to it. I'd been planning to take it all down, but something stopped me. Not because I wanted to dwell on the past, but because I wanted to remember what I was capable of when someone tried to destroy me. I was Cole Merrick. I built things for a living, but when necessary, I could tear things down too. I turned off the lights and went upstairs, leaving the evidence wall as it was. Tomorrow, I'd start considering the future. Tonight, I was content to reflect on how far I'd come from that Thursday evening, when I'd stood in a hotel parking lot, holding withered roses and realizing that my marriage had been a lie. I'd been the fool then. I wasn't the fool anymore, and I never would be again. The story ends here, with Cole Merrick alone in his house, having destroyed the people who betrayed him and reclaimed his life. There's no reconciliation, no new romance, no neat resolution that ties up every loose end. Sometimes the best ending is simply the moment when you realize you've survived something that should have destroyed you, and you're still standing. Cole Merrick is still standing.